It's hard to believe, here in the year 2013, the tremendous renaissance that 2D platformers are in the midst of. At the turn of the millennium, every major franchise was shifting to 3D, some with more success than others. Just when it seemed that handhelds would be the last bastion for the genre, several downloadable indie titles injected a renewed interest into this quintessential gaming staple. Classic franchises that made the jump to 3D reverted back to or released 2D offshoots. Perhaps the most obscure of these resuscitated franchises is the Giana sisters. Originally released for the Commodore 64 in 1987, the Great Giana Sisters was a Mario clone that didn't last long on store shelves before Nintendo threatened legal action, resulting in copies being pulled from store shelves. In spite of not being in stores long, the Great Giana Sisters developed enough of a cult following to raise $190,000 through Kickstarter to develop Giana Sisters: Twisted Dreams. True to most 2D platformer conventions, the plot is quite simplistic. The player controls Giana as she searches for her sister Maria, who has been kidnapped in the dream world by a dragon. This provides the simple impetus for Giana's journey through the dream world, shifting her persona between a cute girly girl that inhabits a Halloween-inspired iteration of the dream world, and an edgier punk chick who traverses a variation of the dream world that is more colorful and cheery. Giana's personas also have different special abilities. The cutesy Giana has a graceful twirl jump that allows her to glide through the air over extended distances, while the punk Giana can launch herself forward as a fireball. Swapping between these personas and mixing up moves to traverse the environment is integral to surviving Giana. The persona shifting in Giana Twisted Sisters is similar to the time-shifting mechanics in Sonic CD, except that it can be performed on the fly and you are in no way limited to how often or how many times you can shift. Black Forest Games does a commendable job making the most of this gameplay mechanic. There are collectible crystals that litter the world, with red crystals that can only be collected by Punk Giana and yellow crystals obtainable only by cute girly Giana. Collecting all these crystals earns better ratings upon completing levels. The shifting mechanic also adds a puzzle element to the game. Figuring out which sister's maneuvers will allow you to best proceed through an area is central to the puzzle theme. It's fast-paced and never leaves you scratching your head for long, but keeps you mentally engaged with the surroundings. Platforms will appear in one dimension that don't appear in another. Platforms move in certain directions with one persona, while moving in another with the opposite persona. Enemies change completely, requiring one persona to defeat the enemy, while the other uses the defeated enemy as a traversal tool. There is almost always something new in Giana Sisters. While Giana Sisters starts as a cakewalk, the difficulty ramps up quickly as you are required to shift dozens of times to complete small stretches of levels. Some areas require you to cocoon yourself in bubblegum and float through razor-sharp crystals. Others require you to run through a gauntlet of obstacles while being chased by a wall of fire. Boxes can be pushed to create raised platforms, and some levels have a more open design that requires Giana to collect several keys in a determined order to open a passageway to a new area. These challenges are remixed and recycled into devilish combinations late in the game. Frustration is mitigated by plentiful checkpoints and infinite lives. Many checkpoints are placed just after a difficult series of obstacles, almost rendering the game rage-quit proof. Visually, Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams is extremely appealing. The backdrops are colorful and layered with detail. The juxtaposition between the dimensions is natural and entirely seamless. It is easy to spend time shifting between dimensions in some areas just to see how objects in one dimension are translated into the other dimension. Large, hollowed-out tree trunks in the cheery dimension become massive reptilian skulls. Wells become rotted tree stumps. Owls become horned demons. Texture resolutions are high, and effects for things like water are far from generic, with cloudy patches and bubbles. It is unfortunate that most of the same elements are reused for much of the game. Assets from the first level are found in great abundance in later stages, and while I appreciate a 2D platformer that doesn't fall into the fire, ice, and desert level cliches, a greater degree of visual variety would have been appreciated. The visuals are not the only thing that shifts. Each of the game's tunes shift between dimensions in a completely seamless fashion. The original composer for the Great Giana Sisters, Chris Hulsbeck, is responsible for the main tracks, while Swedish metal band Machine Supremacy offer their own interpretation of the compositions. These are lively tunes set in a different tone that is commonly found in most platformers by favoring shredded guitars over whimsical melodies common to most games in the genre. It is unfortunate, however, that there aren't more tracks to enjoy. As you near the last third of the game, the soundtrack can seem immensely repetitive. While perhaps one of the most obscure franchises to be resuscitated in recent memory, Giana Sisters proves itself to be a worthwhile, enjoyable experience. It's colorful, challenging, and makes excellent use of a handful of mechanics. It is perhaps the best mix of platforming puzzles and reflex-based gameplay on the market. While the limited soundtrack and small pool of art assets can make the last portion of the game a little less invigorating than the first, it does little to take away from the excellent gameplay. If you have conquered Donkey Kong and saved Princess Peach a dozen times from the clutches of Bowser, then it's time you considered shifting through Dreamland as teenage hero Giana.